Daniel Ruben Odio, but I go by DROdio. It's my handle on everything. So, yeah, and my kids are also DROdio, which is fun. So you have two things in front of you. You should have a post-it, you should have a name tag. So for the name tag, I do not want you to write your name down. I want you to write down one word that describes you the best. Write one word that describes you. So for example, I'll go ahead and fill out a name tag as well.
I think one or two. I think I have that.
So for me, I think the word that probably describes me the best is relentless. So that's going to be my word. So I will join you here.
Oh, you need one?
It's long. Hold on. It's a lot. Yeah, we have a lot.
Okay. So write down one word that describes you the best. Put it on. That's going to be what defines you today. Mine's relentless. We'll find out why in a few minutes. I want to know what all of you think the best word is to describe you. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to do a little exercise together. On the post-it note, it doesn't matter what color you have, but on the post-it note, do not look at the person to your left or to your right. But I want you to write down two things. The first thing is, how many golf balls fit in a bathtub? What is your answer to that question? How many golf balls fit in a bathtub? Do not look at your neighbor. And number two is, on a scale of 1 to 4, how sure are you in whatever number you put down? 4 means I'm sure, 1 means I have no idea, 2 is I'm probably wrong, 3 is I'm probably right. Okay? How many golf balls fit in the bathtub? And how sure are you of your number? Alright, so let's just take 1 minute to write this down. So we're not going to take a lot of time here. Okay? Take 1 minute to write it down. And while we're doing that, the fine volunteers that I have helping out, I've got more instructions for you, please.
Okay.
If you go ahead and write your answers down too, and then there's just one more thing that I need from you. Yes, question in the back.
What were the numbers we said for this?
How many golf balls fit in a bathtub? And then how sure are you in your answer? 4 means you're very sure that you're right. 1 means you're very sure that you're wrong, you have no idea. 2 means you're probably wrong, 3 means you're probably right.
Like top with 5 level.
And okay, what's the word that best describes you? Put that on your name tag.
Okay. Anything can be.
Any word that best describes you.
Okay.
So constant and courage. Constant and courage are going to collect your answers. And then what I would like to ask you to do on this board, let's make a little. Everybody who's a 1, everybody who's a 2, everybody who's a 3, everybody who's a 4. Okay? So grab the post-its. We'll see if they actually stick on here. They might not. Let's see if we can actually. Yeah, they probably won't say it, but we'll try. So we're going to group the answers based on confidence level. So courage and constant. Let's go ahead and grab post-its from everybody. I'll also grab them too. I'll take the number. Take yours. Okay. Take yours. Okay. Take yours. Yours. Hold on a second. Oh, there's a lot of very sure people here. I like it, a lot of confidence. Yep, my confidence level. Okay, so let's talk about why we just did this exercise. So I'm here to challenge some of your assumptions today. And I'm really here for you, which means that we're going to talk about whatever all of you want to talk about. But I just want to start because the topic is about making money. It's about business models and making money. And I think the thing that I find the most interesting about this topic is A, startup's probably not the right way to do it. It's a very low chance of succeeding. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But B, it's all about thinking about things in a little bit of a different way. A little bit of a different way than the norm. Because norm means normal. It means the way that most of us think. The thing that I find most interesting about this exercise is that you all thought that you had to figure it out on your own. You all thought you had to figure it out on your own. So you all gave me what's effectively your best guess. And some of you are very sure about your best guess. The numbers range anywhere from 5,431, 15 million, another very sure person, all the way down to 120. Isn't that interesting that the people who are very sure, positive that they were right, have orders of magnitude of delta in their answers? Isn't that interesting that those of you who are sure that you were right are giving me very different answers? The people who weren't as sure, not quite as confident, but still thought they were right, it goes anywhere from 100 to 5,000. The people who weren't so sure, 10 to the 6, that's a good one. 2,500, 400, 500, 15,000. So, why didn't anybody just Google it?
It's relative. You don't know how big the bathtub is.
That's very true. It's based on a lot of assumptions. Right? And so do you know what assumptions I was making when I asked you the question? You all made your own assumptions, right? So anyone with a laptop, I'm going to try Googling how many golf balls fit in a bathtub. I'll do it with you. And let's just look at the answers. A bunch of answers. Oh, look, DROdio has an answer. Let's see what he had to say. How many golf balls fit in a bathtub? It's interesting that few people just Google the answer. The answer is it depends on the size of the bathtub. And it depends on the size of the golf balls. Whether or not the bathtub is empty or full, and a lot of other assumptions. But everybody just made their own assumptions. They didn't check to find out what my assumptions were. The answer, for the record, is about 10,231 if you account for the golf ball in the drain. But it doesn't really matter what the answer is. What matters is the way that you answered the question. And if you want to talk about making money, you have to be very understanding of what the problem is that you're trying to solve for your customer. What is the pain that you're trying to solve for in the marketplace? And you have to understand their pain and what they're going for. And you can't be sure about your answer when you don't understand what assumptions they're working with. Most of you, I guess it's about 50-50. Most of you are actually twos. But many of you, about half of you, were pretty sure that you were right. And so, again, I'm just here to challenge your assumptions, right? So let's move past this exercise, but just think about that. It's about figuring out and uncovering the pain of the people that you are solving problems for. It's not about being sure about your answer. It's not about working with your assumptions. It's about understanding theirs. Does that make sense? Because we all just did it today. And half of you would have failed miserably based on my assumptions. Okay, so I'm here to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I sent a survey out, and in the survey I asked you, what do you want to talk about? These are the things that you told me. You want to have wisdom. I don't know if I've got wisdom, but you said that you want the chance to learn from other people's mistakes rather than your own. I can definitely help you there. I made plenty. So we'll try to help you learn from my mistakes, which has taken decades to accumulate. They say experience is what you get right after you need it. So be happy to share my experience with you. That's one thing that you asked for. Other people ask for, how do you recognize an opportunity to employ software to improve someone's quality of life? Okay, we can talk about that. How to approach investors, we can talk about that. Be happy to talk about that as well. What's your advice for someone who wants to work in a startup but not be a founder? You're very intelligent. That's a good move. Being a founder is a world of pain, so we can talk about that. Lifestyle and productivity tips. I've got plenty of those. Personal journey. I'll be happy to share my journey with you. Let's prioritize an agenda together. So the first thing is, this is a shared collaborative document. Any of you can go to go.danielodio.com/Berkeley, and you'll be able to open this document up, and you can take notes in here. So one of the things, all of you with laptops, that I encourage you to do, whatever we talk about tonight, take notes in this document, right? Let's create a living document that we can all benefit from. So let's actually make a section at the bottom of this document for raw notes. So I'll just go down to the bottom, and we'll just say raw notes. Feel free to put your notes here. Someone want to try typing just to make sure that it works? There we go. Perfect. Good on you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay? So you can put notes in here. We'll all be able to benefit from those notes together. Okay, let's go back up to the top of the document, and let's prioritize an agenda together. So I'd be happy to talk about business models. We can talk about B2B. We can talk about B2C. We can talk about bottoms up versus tops down, different types of companies, sales versus marketing versus technology-led companies, and what that means. We can talk about scaling go-to-market. We can talk about monetizing open source. But I think what I probably really want to share with you is the passion of being an entrepreneur. And the reason I say that is because I asked you who wants to be an entrepreneur, a founder, and most of you said that you want to do a startup someday. Some of you said that you want to do it in the next 12 months, and some of you said forget about it. Too smart to actually do a startup. The thing that I thought was actually really interesting is that none of you said, I'm doing a startup right now. And I'm curious to understand why. What is keeping all of you from doing a startup right now? Berkeley? I'll tell you, my father's an immigrant. He came from Costa Rica when he was in his 20s, and he came with a few dollars in his pocket. And he told me, he said, son, if you want to go to college, I support you, but you're going to be paying for it yourself. And so I had to pay for college myself. And I would be happy to tell you about that story, but it meant that I was an entrepreneur from a very young age. Literally, when I was 10 years old, I was trying to make a few dollars. And I was just surprised to see that none of you are. And that's fine, because it's smarter not to be, I promise you. But for those of you that are passionate about doing it someday, I'd like to know what's keeping you from doing it now. Doesn't mean you can't be in school, but what's keeping you from doing it now? So tell me, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about my story? Do you want to talk about business models? Do you want to talk about how to make money? Let's make an agenda together. Let's not make this proposed, let's make this actual, and let's decide what's in it. How do you want to spend the next, how long do we have? Half hour, 40 minutes?
45.
45 minutes. How do you want to spend the next 45 minutes? Yes, sir. What's your name? Your name tag name. Your name for tonight. Good listener. All right, good listener. What you got?
I think it would be good to hear your story,
Okay.
the challenges you went through, and how you managed to overcome them.
All right. So, DROdio's story, challenges, overcoming adversity. I'll put adversity in quotes because I haven't had all that many issues. What else? Yes, sir. What's your? Well, hold on. You have to have a name tag. You have a name tag, huh?
I arrived late.
You arrived late. Hold on. Let's get your name tag. What is the one word that best describes who you are? You want a pen? There you go. Okay, we'll come back to you. Who else? Yes. What's your name for tonight?
Prudence.
Wait, what is it?
Prudence.
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 That's your name tag name?
Yes. Prudence. Prudence. Prudence.
Like prudence? Like you're being prudent? Like you're not?
Prudence. Very cautious.
Oh, very cautious. Okay, all right. Prudence. Prudent is like cautious with a lot of intelligence behind it, so you're not going to do stupid things. Okay, all right. Prudence. What you got?
Just wonder, what's your suggestions for today's B2B business? What kind of opportunities for
Okay.
B2B field?
Opportunities for building B2B companies? All right. What else? Who else has got something? Yes. What's your name for tonight?
I'm realistic.
Realistic. Okay, realistic.
I'm realistic.
Unrealistic. Oh, awesome. Okay, what you got?
Like I don't know if the startup culture is right for you.
How do you know startup culture is right for you? Okay. All right. So we'll just talk about startup culture generally. Okay. What else? Yes, sir. What's your name?
Gamer.
Gamer. All right, gamer. What you got?
Business model.
Business models. Okay. Anything more specific about business models?
Whatever you want.
All right, gamer. I gotcha. What else? What's your name?
Determined.
Determined. Okay. Good listener and determined sitting next to each other. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask was like, how to once you have an idea, how do you actually approach investors and like kind of
Okay. Well, there's a pretty big delta between having an idea and approaching investors. So we'll actually talk about that specifically. Idea to fundraising. Okay? Let's do a couple more. We're going to run out of time. Yes, sir. Students. You said the best word that describes you is students. You're like studious.
No, I love learning.
Love learning. Okay, perfect. Okay, what you got?
Me, it's more around like you told about business models from like a product perspective or like a sales and marketing perspective. I'd like to know more about that.
Okay, so we can talk about a subset here. We'll get into these different types of companies, right? Like that. Okay. All right, one or two more? Yes. What's your name?
Dynamic.
Dynamic. All right, cool.
Like how you went about finding the business model that's right for your business.
Okay. So under business models, we can talk about choosing a business model. Right? Yes, name.
Happy.
Happy, okay. Happy.
And how do you get into startups without being a founder?
How do you get, okay, all right, cool. Okay, so we're definitely going to run out of time. We'll do that as startup culture, so working at startups. Okay, so let me just prioritize these a bit since we're going to run out of time. I think what I would propose is that we do this. I'll tell you a little bit about me. Then we'll talk about startup culture. We'll talk about idea to fundraising. And then we can probably actually make this a subset of this one. How does that look? How does that look for the name? Does that sound good? Good. Okay. So about me, I am a lifelong entrepreneur. My father, as I said, who was an immigrant, really shaped me when I was young. I think the thing about an immigrant mentality is that you're not as comfortable. I think a lot of Americans who are getting, allowances of $20 a week, they don't need to find a lot of the opportunity and pain that you just are forced to have to find when you don't have that luxury. And so my dad helped me see that there's opportunity everywhere, and we just have to look for it. And it kind of gets back to this exercise that we did at the beginning. It's like letting go of your assumptions and just looking at the world from a new lens. When we were young, I must have been maybe 10 years old, we moved into a subdivision where construction workers were still building houses. And my dad said to me, "Hey Danny," because he called me Danny, he said, "Hey Danny, don't you think those construction workers are thirsty?" I'd be like, "Yeah, Dad, I think they are. They probably are thirsty." So he took me to Costco, which used to be called Price Club back in the day. And we'd buy sodas for 25 cents each. And then I'd put them in a wheelbarrow, and I would take them out to the construction workers, and I'd sell them for 50 cents each. And that's how I got started. And then I tried to get some of my friends to join me, and they were like, "I'm not going to be out in the hot sun selling sodas. Like, what are you, crazy? I'm going to be at home watching TV." And they just didn't have the same need that I had to make money because it wasn't a choice for me. And so I put myself through college, doing all sorts of different startups. I actually threw some photos in here, so let me see if I can find a few of them. Oh, that's Burning Man. Burning Man's fun. Some of these, I'll try reloading this page. Some of these may not have popped up. Here we go. So this is me in college. I made Frisbees. I went to UVA. I made Frisbees because everyone at UVA loves Frisbee, but there were no UVA branded Frisbees. So I went to the athletics department. I was like, "Will you let me license the logo?" They were like, "Yeah, for $100." I was like, "Okay." And then I made Frisbees. It cost me $3 to make them. I sold them for $6 to the local bookstore. They sold them for $12 to the students. And so I paid for college that way. I did another thing that I didn't put a picture on, but it worked really well. So I made this thing called the Who's Savings Club card. And it was just a little credit card. I should have brought one with me because I still have them up in my attic. I basically went around to all the local businesses on campus. At UVA, we're called grounds, so around grounds. And I went to all the local businesses and I said, well, you give a discount to students if they show up with a card. It'll make them come into your store more. And I got a bunch of discounts and I printed them on the back of this credit card. And then I sold the credit cards for $20 each and they were valid for the school year. So it's kind of like Groupon analog 20 years ago. But it cost me zero, like the card cost 1 penny to print. And I made $20 off the card. And all I had to do was hustle. I'd put a little table up in front of the stores that were offering the discounts, and I'd be like, hey, you should buy a card. It's $20 for the school year. You can get 5% off at the store each time you visit. So again, just like seeing opportunities where other people didn't, right? So that's how I got started. I was part of the dot-com boom and bust. We had this sort of called NetWhistle. That's me back in '99. I was bald even back then. So that company, went up and then crashed. That was an interesting experience. I started my own real estate company. So I realized early on, I'm not a real estate guy, but I'm a tech guy, and I realized that back in 2003, if you wanted to access the multiple listing database of homes, you had to go to like Century 21 or Remax and type in an address. And I was like, man, if I can get access to that database, I can just create a flat file representation that Google can spider, and then when someone Googles 1234 Main Street, my site will come up. And so I did that, and I started offering rebates to people buying homes as an incentive to get them to use me, and it was just like crazy for about four years. People would call me, they'd Google an address, they'd call me, I'd go represent them, they'd buy $1 million house, I'd make a $30,000 commission check, I'd give $20,000 back, I'd make $10,000 for 3 hours of work, over and over and over and over again. So that was interesting, but it was just applying technology to real estate, right? I turned that into this thing called rebate reps. You can see how I was a much bigger guy at one point. We can talk about health as well, if you'd like. There's Burning Man. Then I did a startup called Socialize, got married, had a kid. I've actually got 2 kids now. What I'm doing today is a startup called Armory. Armory is commercializing an open source project. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Armory. I'll just tell you a brief highlight. So I started my last startup in 2013. And we arrived at this larger company that couldn't even deploy its own website. It was like hitting a brick wall. And it took us 3 years to build a platform that basically unclogged the toilet, that allowed that company to ship software with velocity and safety. We went from 4 deployments a month to 2,400 deployments a month, and it was just this magical experience. And I believe that in the next couple of decades, every company is going to have to figure out how to be a software company. How does Marriott compete against Airbnb? Airbnb is the largest hospitality company in the world now. How does Marriott compete? Airbnb doesn't have any hotel rooms. They're playing by different rules. And so these large industrial age Global 2000 companies have to figure out how to transform and become software companies. And so what we're doing from our experience solving that problem, we're helping these Global 2000 companies also solve that problem. And that startup is called Armory, and we're commercializing an open source project that came out of Netflix and Google in order to do that. We're helping bring this open source project into these Global 2000 companies. Just did a Series A, we raised $10 million in the Series A. We raised a total of 14, and the company is growing very quickly. I think the message to all of you is, I think I saw that most of you are like CS majors, right? If you're in software, you're in the right place. It's a very good place to be. So to the extent that you stay in software, just get really good at cloud native technologies, Kubernetes, being able to deploy out to public cloud, AWS, GCP, Azure, and companies will fight for you. Like, you can probably make $150,000, $200,000 a year right out of school if you choose to. So that's my story. It's basically a lot of hustling. I joke that a startup CEO is just that does everything just poorly enough to motivate others to do it better. So I was a web developer back in the first .com boom and bust. I was a Cold Fusion developer. If anybody has heard of Cold Fusion, which you probably haven't. But I'm a pretty terrible developer, but I love it. I started my career in enterprise sales. I just do everything a little bit, and I think that's what a startup CEO has to be good at. Which kind of gets us into our second topic. I think it's our second topic about startups and startup culture, and is it right for you? Working at a startup without founding it. So the thing about being a founder, you should only be a founder of a startup if you can't not be a founder. If you have an idea that you can't not do because you just keep thinking about it, it keeps waking you up at night, you keep thinking, man, the world really needs this. If you have that, then you should go do it. If you don't have that level of passion about it, you should absolutely not do it because it is not a balanced life. You saw how big of a guy I was at some point. Like I almost died after my last startup. And it just, you do not have a balanced life being a founder. And the reason is that a startup is basically, it's a baby. Just like having a kid. It needs a lot of care and attention. It's always waking you up at night. It's always being unreasonable about its demands on your time. I mean, it is like, I've got 2 kids now, and a startup I think is a worse kid than any of my actual kids because it's also all consuming. You're always thinking about the startup. You're thinking about it in the shower. You're thinking about it when you're talking to someone and you're pretending to have a conversation with them, but you're actually just trying to solve a problem in your head. So your friends are like, where are you? And what happened to you? It's a very, very unbalanced life. But if you have an idea that you think the world needs, you should absolutely do it. If you don't, then a very smart thing to do is to work in companies that have been largely de-risked. And I'd say Series A and Series B is a pretty good place. Series A company will usually have raised somewhere between $5 and $15 million. Series B, anywhere between, let's call it 15 and 30 million. So they'll have money in the bank account. They'll have 1 to 2 to 3 years of runway. They'll have something that's working at some level. So it's a really good place to go to work because you have a lot of autonomy, a lot of ability to do a lot of different things. So it's very, startup-like experience. But it's a much more balanced company. And I think that the people that have probably done the best that I know have just done that over and over and over again. They've worked at startups, they've invested anywhere between 1 and 4 years, and then they've just gone to the next company that's Series A, Series B stage. That's actually a really good way to go. Because if only 1 or 2 of 5 companies that you work at do well, the equity that you got really early on will be very valuable. So I think that's actually a really smart thing to do. Let me stop there for a second and just let you ask questions. Again, I'm here for you. I'm not doing this for me. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. So who's got some? What was your name again?
Courage.
Courage, yes.
Yeah, that's about that 2% real estate website graded. Did it because at that time the rebate in real estate sales is not a norm? I think right.
Yeah, so now many companies do it. Back in 2003. So Courage's question was the rebate that you were giving, is that because that wasn't the norm? This was back in 2003. Yes, that's exactly right. Today there's Redfin, which really took that and made a business out of it.
Yeah, and a lot of individual realtors, they also do it.
Right, yep. It's a much more common thing today than it used to be. The reason I did it was because I didn't know anything about real estate. I literally was clueless about real estate. So to convince people to use me, I had to give them some other reason beyond my real estate wisdom, of which there was none. So it actually worked out pretty well. All right, who else has got a question? Other things you'd like to know about what you've heard so far? Yes, Courage again.
Yeah. So you have been a serial entrepreneur. So I want to know that for all the companies you shut down or sold to others, when do you feel okay it's the right time to move on?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, when do you move on from a company if it's not working? The thing that I've really come to believe is that a company does not fail until the founder gives up. I really believe that to be true. And I've had experiences where I've been 1 week away from missing payroll. We've never missed payroll in any of my companies. So I've done about four real startups and then a bunch of other businesses. And we've never actually failed. I've never had a company that I had to close the closed doors though. There were companies that I had to sell because we ran out of options. And so I think if I had been wiser about the cash in our bank account, we would have had more shots on goal. But I really believe that a company doesn't fail or close until the founder gives up. Now I will say a couple of things about that. The money that is in your bank account, the way that I've come to think about it now is doing a startup is like scuba diving at depth. It's murky, you don't know which way is up, and you're not even sure where you're going. And you have a certain amount of air in your tank. And that's the money that you've raised. And when that money runs out, you're done, right? And so you need to treat that cash very, very, very preciously. And have you seen the movie Schindler's List? There's a scene in Schindler's List at the end where Oscar Schindler's like, this pin, I could have saved a few more people if I'd sold this pin, or this car, I could have saved a few more people if I'd sold this car. He's so regretful about the decisions that he made or didn't make. That's kind of what it's like when you're running out of money. You're like, oh man, that foosball table that we bought for $2,000 a year ago, we could have lasted another week if we hadn't bought that. Things like that. You really become regretful about the ways that you spent the money that you had. Because the thing that you need to realize in a startup is every dollar isn't a dollar. Every dollar represents $10 to $100 of opportunity generation that you need to make. You need to turn that dollar into value. And so when you spend $100 or so on something, what you're really doing is it's an opportunity cost. You're foregoing the opportunity to make $1,000 or $10,000 by spending that $100 somewhere else in the optimal place that generates the most value. So just being very, very careful about your burn and your spend in a startup at the very beginning is super important. And the more lean that you can be, the more shots on goal you'll have. Really what you want to do, because you're scuba diving at depth and it's murky, what you really want to do is you want to give yourself as many opportunities to fail so that you have the chance to actually succeed. Because it's very hard to get away from the assumptions that we have and actually listen to the market and solve the problems that they have. And so you want as many shots on goal as you can possibly have. And that means being as lean as you can possibly be until you find something that's working. And that gets a little bit, yeah.
So
listen.
how do you really turn off that noise? Those
Okay. How do you turn off the noise? That's an excellent question, by the way. You are a really good listener. How do you turn off the noise? How do you turn off all the assumptions that you're making? So I actually learned this from my co-founder of his current company. And I'll just give you a story to answer that question. So I've been doing startups with one of my co-founders. I've got two other co-founders. There's three of us that started Armory together. I've been doing startups with one of the guys. On a conference call with East Coast companies, we're calling CTOs and CIOs and VPs of engineering. And we'd ask them, what are the problems that you're having when you try to deliver software? I want to understand. And we did 30 to 60-minute calls with each of these, 100 of them. It took us months. And what we learned in that process was, for these big companies, it's not about velocity. It's about safety. These big companies, all they want to do is not break customer trust when they deliver software to their users. That's like the first thing. You can't drive the Ferrari fast if you don't have your seatbelt strapped on. So if we hadn't talked to those 100 people, we would have been solving the wrong problem. We would have been solving a problem for velocity. How do you deploy faster? But for them it was, how do you deploy safer first, before you think about deploying faster? And so it was really Ben that taught me that Isaac and I had been doing way too much coding behind closed doors at our past startups. We hadn't really listened to the marketplace. And so having a few just like tenants, there's no facts inside the building. So as much as we think we know, it's the customer and listening to them. The customer will never know the answer, but they will always know their pain. They will always be able to describe their pain. They'll think they know the answer. It's your job to find the answer, but it's also your job to listen to their pain. I'll tell you another story about that. So there's a great podcast. Has anybody heard, I think it's 99% Invisible. Has anybody heard that podcast? It's a great architecture design podcast. So they were talking about the design of the game basketball. And I'm not a sports guy, so I'm probably going to butcher this, but in the 60s, basketball was getting a little boring. And so there was this new league. I don't even know the name of the league, but there was this new league that kind of broke off. It was trying a lot of weird, different things about basketball to make it more exciting. And one of the problems with basketball was that people would just block the shot. And so it was getting boring. People were just blocking the shot. And everyone had, like the commissioners had these ideas to raise the height of the basket, lower the height of the basket, all of these solutions that had to do with the actual problem of people blocking the shot. But this new league was doing a lot of experimenting. They were doing crazy things because they didn't have all the strict rules of the main league. And one of the crazy things they did, does anybody know the answer to making basketball exciting again? What's that? The three-point shot. That's exactly right. They came up with the three-point shot. Had nothing to do with the basket height, right? It was a solution that was completely different than what the people who thought they knew the answers were looking at. And it just goes to show you, like, it's very important to understand the problem from your user's perspective. What's the pain they're having? But then it's your job to do a lot of experimentation to find that thing like a three-point shot. Because it's probably not going to be the obvious thing. So, a couple stories to answer your question. All right, who else has questions? Yes. Wait, what's your name?
My name is Tired.
Tired.
Yeah. So I have a question regarding how do you balance your personal health as well as family while you're doing this startup and all?
Okay. How do you balance personal health and family with a startup? The answer is that you can't. You don't. You really don't. Now I got really lucky. I actually met my wife in 2003 when I started that real estate company. She was buying a house. And so she called one of my signs. So I always say it must have been a sign. But so we ended up building the real estate company together. And she is an incredibly understanding spouse and partner for me, because she always jokes that she's the mistress to the startup, right? Because a startup is all-consuming. It's all-consuming. And so having a partner that is very understanding of whatever your ambitions are really helps massively. There's no question about that. But you will not have a balanced life if you do a startup. It simply is not possible. If you want to make it really successful in a really big way. That doesn't mean that you can't have a lifestyle business. Lifestyle businesses are underrated, right? Like, why raise tens of millions of dollars, dilute yourself, and then probably end up failing when you can, make $1 million a year and have an amazing life? So it really just depends on what your ambitions are. The title of this talk is How to Make Money, but really for founders that are passionate about it, it's not about making money. It's about value creation. It's about creating something from nothing. It's about having that idea that you can't let go of because you think the world needs something that doesn't currently exist in the world. The money is a side effect. It's a benefit that happens when you solve those problems well. But if you just try to make money, you're not going to be passionate enough, and the pain is going to be so great that I'm very sure that you will not be able to see it through to a point where it will be successful. You have to do it because you're passionate about it. I wish I had a better answer for you, though. Yes, in the back, what's your name?
Curious.
Curious, all right. What you got, Curious?
I have a quick question about what you just said right now. So I know in Silicon Valley it's a huge thing, creating value, not worrying about the money, really just worrying about adding value to people's lives and changing people's lives. But when you're really, really young, say for example 19, 20, 21, you're thinking about all the other things involved and growing up, obviously financial stuff, right?
Yeah.
Money's obviously a big thing right there.
Yeah.
So then even yourself, as a son of a immigrant, how do you kind of balance that out? Because money's obviously really important too at the same time.
Yep.
And where do you where does that switch happen where it's all right, it's not about money anymore, it's really about creating that value?
So I'll tell you one thing that I know for sure is true. There will never be as good a day for any of you to start a company as yesterday. Yesterday was the best day for you to start a company. Guaranteed. Because life only becomes more complicated. You only have more responsibilities. You fall in love, you find a partner, your partner's like, why are you working so hard? Or not, maybe they're very supportive. You have some kids. The kids are like, Daddy, I never see you. I've got 2 kids at home right now that I'm not seeing, right? It happens to me all the time. I'm out many nights a week. My 5-year-old, my 2-year-old, by the way, I have a 3rd one on the way. So they don't have their dad tonight, right? It will never be as good as it was yesterday to start a company. So I think another way to answer that is, it's not about money, it's about burn. and your burn is probably very low right now. You probably don't, like, who has a house payment they have to make? Right? Like, I actually have 9 people at home that I have to feed. If you can believe that. 9 people. I've got my kids, I've got my wife, her mother lives with us, her sister and husband also live with us, and their kid lives with us, and I have another one on the way. So that's a lot more cost and burn than probably any of you have right now, hopefully. So it will never be as good as yesterday to start a company. And so if your burn is low and your needs are low, then and if you know how to write software, your opportunities are very limitless. The only thing that you really have to watch out for is that you think that you know the answers. So don't think that you know the answers. Be curious. Wait, you're curious. Yeah, there's a few people that are curious in here, right? Be curious about the pain that other people are having that you can solve for. And then just iterate. Take as many shots on goal as you can. Don't be afraid to fail. Experiment. Most experiments will fail. Some of them won't. The ones that won't, you double down on. And you try a little bit more there. You just keep doubling down. It's just a very iterative process. It took Airbnb 1,000 days to figure their business out. It's like, oh, this huge, obvious success today. So imagine how stupid it sounded before it existed. Like, you're going to let someone into your house and let them on your couch? Does that sound like a good idea? Yeah? Sounds like a terrible idea, but it wasn't. It's very non-obvious. Okay. Other questions? We'll talk about fundraising next, but I want to answer more questions if there are. What's your name?
Energetic.
Wait, whoa.
Energetic.
What's your name tag name?
Energetic.
Energetic.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said Andrew Jacket. Okay. Energetic. Okay. What you got?
So we were talking about start a startup as soon as possible, or like once you have a good idea. So how would you say you balance your schoolworks and doing all the startup stuff? How would you balance?
Again, so the question is, how do you balance school and startups? And the answer is you probably don't. To be very honest, if you do really want the startup, you're going to have to decide which you want to be really great at, probably. I'm not suggesting you drop out. Go to an amazing school. You should probably finish. You should definitely finish if you can. But it's a great problem to have as well, right? If you have something that's working so well that you have to make that choice. There's worse problems to have. Although I do always say first world problems are still problems, right? But I think the more likely answer is that, so who is a first year, freshman, sophomore? Who's a junior, senior? Yeah, like if you're a senior, it's very likely that you're going to finish. If you're a junior, you'll probably finish. If you're a freshman or sophomore, it's very questionable how it goes. But again, it's a good problem to have. I don't really think that you can actually balance it well if your startup's taking off. So, I've got a question for you. Some of you have asked me, how do you get rid of the noise, thinking that you have it right? And my answer back to you has been, you have to ask your users, you have to listen to the market. Why have none of you asked me what my pains are that I would pay money to solve for? You're all software developers. There's probably pain that I'm having that I'd love to solve for. I'd probably love for some of you to build something awesome for some problems I'm having. Why is nobody asking that question? You have an audience right here with a checkbook, right? What was that?
What are your pains?
What are my pains? Oh, I'm glad you asked. So let me actually show you something real fast. I actually need to unclip for a second because there's a part of this that I can't show you, or else Michael from YC will kick my ass. But I'm going to show you something that I just put up on Bookface. So Bookface is Y-Combinator's joke from Facebook. It's an internal forum for founders. And I just put up here a product request. So I can show you what I wrote. Give me a second here. Okay. If somebody built this, I would probably pay $1,000 a month for this today. I would definitely pay $100 a month. I'd probably pay more. So I just asked the YC community, here's something that drives me absolutely fucking batshit about startups, about business. We have these very, very expensive, very, very talented resources that we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for. our engineers, our sales engineers, our product leaders, answering questions in all sorts of private places in JIRA. Who knows what JIRA is? All right, awesome. What's your name again? Oh yeah, determined. All right, you're determined. All right. JIRA is a way to take ideas and break them up into stories so that you can actually code against them and create software, right? It's a way for product interface with engineering. I have an idea, I want to break it up into units of work. We're going to write some user stories, and then you actually develop against those. So in JIRA, in Slack, who uses Slack? I don't know if Slack's really big with you guys. Yeah, it's big with us as well. In Dropbox Paper, that's this collaborative document system, right? In Intercom, which is like a chat system. So we're answering all these questions privately, but none of our answers are making it out into the world, which means Google can't index them. We're not getting any SEO. We're not getting any credibility. We're doing 95% of the work, but there's no platform, there's no system that allows us to sanitize that private content and then promote it into public, like knowledge base articles. So it drives me crazy that we have all these very expensive resources answering these very complex questions. Now, I have a question, can Spinnaker run a shell script that makes calls to create a Docker container, or is this generally not within the realm of possibility? And there's our answer, right? So this answer should be spiderable, indexable by Google. If it was, when some cloud architect at a Global 2000 company is asking that same question, we would come up as the experts, as the answer. That person would send us an inquiry, and that could be a 6 to 7 figure sale for our company. So we're already doing the work, and we're not getting any of the benefit. Does that make sense? Why does that platform not exist? I would pay for that platform today. So I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'm going to put this spec into Dropbox Paper. Let me grab all this. And if anybody wants to build this, I will buy it today. There it is. Okay? There's something that I'm desperate for.
Do you think Quora is a platform for that?
Okay, willful. Is Quora a platform for that? Possibly.
Yeah, what if you have an API, say, from the Slack, and then you click the button and automatically get published on Quora?
Okay, so this is cool. We're riffing, right?
Yeah.
Right? What if you're having a private Slack conversation, there's some sort of integration, and a sales engineer could hit a button and it'll get published on Quora? So it's not exactly solving for the pain that we have, and I'll tell you why. The real thing that's missing is not an integration from private to public, because there's other ways that we can do that right now. It's that these very expensive resources don't have the time to sanitize the content. There needs to be some kind of a way to take these private conversations that are happening that have secrets in them, that have IP addresses in them, and all sorts of other things that we can't make public, that can have some sort of intelligence to it, that sanitizes that content and makes it easy for a non-technical person to then promote it into a public forum. I actually don't care that much what the public forum is. I'd love for it to go to Quora. I'd love for it to go to RKB. I just want it to be public in a way that Google can find it, so that when people type, a question, we come up with the answer. It doesn't matter to me so much what that venue is, but there's really, there's different shades of this answer. So let's talk about an MVP. Who knows what MVP stands for? Does everybody? What's your name?
Ambitious.
Ambitious. Okay. What does MVP stand for?
Minimum viable product.
Minimum viable product. What's the simplest version of this that satisfies the requirements, right? And so the MVP is probably that it's a system that just aggregates all the content from probably just one private source to start, let's call it Slack, and puts it in some sort of a staging area and does some level of sanitizing that. And maybe it's not perfect. It's okay if it's not perfect, but I need to be able to have a $60,000 resource, somebody who's not technical, look at it and understand if it's safe to hit publish on, so that my $250,000 resource doesn't have to spend time doing that, who is a technical person that knows whether or not it's safe to publish. So that's really what's missing. Yes. What was your name again?
Curious.
Curious. All right.
Why is this valuable for you to go on Google, for example? Like, why do you care if other people know stuff that you guys have talked about inside your company?
Okay, so the question is, why is it valuable for us to put this on Google? So, what do you think the answer to that question is? Let me start.
I think it's like if you're solving someone's problem for free, and then it's like a marketing play in a sense. That's the way I thought of it. Like,
yep.
Maybe like an inbounding play, like for B2B sales. Does that make sense? Or?
Yep, it makes sense. Let me actually show you one more thing. Gotta take the screen off for a second. Again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you Slack. So this is a Slack workspace for our open source project. Actually, let me show you a different one. Who knows what Kubernetes is? Raise your hand. Awesome. You should all know Kubernetes, by the way. It is a freight train. You get good at that, you can work anywhere in the world and make a couple $100,000 as soon as you graduate. So this is a Kubernetes Slack workspace that has 58,000 people in it. 58,712 people in it. They're all in here, right? They all care about Kubernetes, which it's a container orchestration system, by the way. So let's just do a search for the word Spinnaker. Spinnaker is the open source project that we are commercializing. There are 918 results for the term Spinnaker. 918 times somebody has raised their hand and asked a question about this open source project. We, as a Series A funded company, do you think that we would like to be answering those people's questions? The answer is yes. Because each one of those people could be worth anywhere between $100,000 to $1 million to us if we can get a contract signed with them. But in order to get a contract signed with them, we first have to get them interested in what we're doing. And in order to get them interested in what we're doing, we first have to have a way and a reason to engage with them. So, I could hire a $250,000 person to just troll this, to look through it every day, and to be answering the questions private. Well, it's not that private, but it's in this workspace with 60,000 people. Or I could have all this content that lives in a KB, and I could have a $60,000 person that's looking at this and that's saying, oh, this person's asking about Helm. You know, let me look to see what all the content Lego building blocks are, all the pieces of content that where we've answered questions about Helm, and let me pick one of them and let me answer this person's question. And then that person gets a URL, that's our knowledge base that answers their question, and then they learn about Armory, our startup. And by the way, that's like a version 2 of my product ask, is not only take private content and sanitize it to make it public, but then it's also, you know, make a bot that'll like do this job and automate it so a human doesn't have to, so that anytime someone asks about Spinnaker, we just get a pop-up that's like, hey, someone just asked about Spinnaker and Helm, here are 4 pieces of content that might be the right answer, press 1, 2, 3, or 4 in order to send that back to them. And then automate that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So think of this content as building blocks that we can then assemble in different ways to solve problems like this, but also that Google can index such that when a cloud architect at Home Depot asks a question about digital transformation and about how to ship software faster, we come up as the answer that gives us a lot of credibility. I call it the Angelina Jolie effect. Like, we all know who she is. She has no idea who any of us are, probably. But we all know who she is, and she is a brand, really, right? Her persona is a brand. And so we associate certain things with that brand. And it's the same thing with Armory in a startup. I want us to have credibility in the marketplace. I want people to see us for being experts in how to unclog your toilet and ship software faster. And the thing that like drives me crazy is that we are answering those questions
all day,
privately, all day, and it's not getting out into the world. Okay, we have to go. I think we might even be over time. I don't know. Are we over time?
It's okay, but you can just go to the end of class.
All right. Well, what time is the end of class? Because I don't want to.
At 8.
At 8. Okay. All right. So we still have time. I didn't know if you're all like, I want to go home. If anybody wants to leave, by the way, it's totally cool. I will not be offended. So if you have to go, you can go.
So we have 30.
We have 30 more minutes. Okay, awesome. Okay, let's talk about fundraising as well in a second. But yeah, Wolfel, what you got?
I actually got a question, but I can leave it for.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it actually comes from your like to talk on the problem you're having. So as a B2B startup, how do you recruit your customers? Because they're not like sending a television.
Right. How do we recruit customers? So let's actually get into business models to answer that question. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go to the top. And let's talk about different kinds of business models. So there's really two options. You can go bottoms up, or you can go tops down. And what I mean by that is, bottoms up is really what open source is all about, right? Someone on the weekend tries a new project, they go to GitHub, they fork it or whatever, they grab it, and they test it out, they like it, they bring it into their company, and they're like, hey, this is really awesome, solving a problem for me, and there's no sales force involved. It's just people adopting something, bringing it into their companies, and it's very efficient because it's bottoms up. What typically happens is enough people do that, and then the company, like the system calls home, the company's like, wow, 100 people from Home Depot have installed this thing. I'm going to call Home Depot, maybe like an inside salesperson, and hey, wouldn't you rather have an enterprise license instead of all these individual licenses, right? Or maybe it's completely self-service and it's just, you pay with a credit card and you never have to talk to a salesperson. That's bottoms up. It's very, very efficient. If you can make bottoms up work, you should, because you don't have to have very expensive sellers. The inverse of that is tops down. Tops down is the one who walks in with a briefcase, calls the CTO, CIO, VPNs, whatever, says, hey, you're going to be screwed if you don't figure out a digital transformation in your company. You're going to need this thing that costs $1 million. That salesperson probably makes $300,000, maybe more. And it's a very expensive, very, very inefficient sales process. That's tops down. So bottoms up is great because it really serves as a marketing function. And so in terms of finding customers, that's a really good way to do it. If you can make your product good enough that people just want to adopt it on their own. But not everything is like that. And a good way to think about, is my business bottoms up or tops down, is how close is the buyer to the user. Now with Armory, with our startup, it's actually quite tops down. And the reason is because we are basically doing open heart surgery on these companies. We are saying, you need a new way to deploy your software. You want to digitally transform. You want to be able to ship your software into cloud targets, into AWS, into GCP, into Azure. You need a whole new platform. And that is a big decision that involves many people. It involves the CIO, the CTO, the VPNs, directors. And so we have a very tops-down model because it's a committee decision. The user is very divorced from the buyer. If the user and the buyer are the same person, you can go very bottoms up. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's also, while we're talking about business models, let's also talk about different types of companies. You can have a sales-led company. You have examples like Oracle that has those tops-down, very expensive sellers with their very expensive accounts, their very expensive dinners, their very expensive first-class airline seats, their very expensive hotel rooms, right? That's like a sales-led company. You can have a technology-led company, so that's like Google, for example, right? And then you can have a marketing-led company. A marketing-led company might be something like Salesforce, where a marketing-led company is really leveraging all of the interest in the marketplace for like a CRM solution. CRM, no software, very heavily branded, right? So what kind of company you create, again, depends a lot on what the product actually is. It's not something you can exactly just choose. Depends on, really at the core of it, what kind of a product you're building. Okay, let's talk about fundraising a little bit. So somebody asked me, how do you have an idea and take it to an investor? So the answer is do not do that. Okay, do not have an idea and take it to an investor. First of all, I always say, this is like a little bit crude, so I feel bad about saying it, so I'm going to say it a bit. Like, ideas are like sperm. They really are. They have the potential to grow into something amazing, a human, right? But like individually, they're not worth all that much. And like, if you think your idea is so valuable, just go sell your idea. Like, don't even bother executing on the actual company because you'll be way better off. Because the devil's in the details. It's all about the execution. So your idea might be great, but it's not all that meaningful. It's really about executing against that idea to turn it into something great. And so don't be protective of your ideas. Like if you're passionate about the idea, there's gonna be so much pain involved in like turning it into a successful company that if someone, like you tell someone and they're not that passionate about it, they're never gonna be able to do it. It's not about the idea, it's about making the idea happen. And so when it comes to fundraising, I actually have another document. So I put a little resources section at the top, and one of the resources is my best startup advice. And so in here, we talk about how experience is what you get right after you need it. So I've put a bunch of resources, of things that I wish that I knew when I was sitting in your seat 20 years ago. And anybody can read this, it's publicly available. How to build a multi-billion-dollar company, which I have not yet done. Although I think Amory could be that company, we'll see. A bunch of research to do, how to start a startup, my best tips at Armory, want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, startup metrics for pirates, which is a really good deck, how to think about fundraise type, sizes, and goals. So this is a little guide that I put together. So friends and family and angel funding, 5 to 6 digit raise. So let's call it, $50,000 to $500,000. This is some of the dream of the kind of fire that you're going to create, the kind of product that you're going to make. Seed funding. So this is mid-6, $500K to a couple $1 million. These are investors who, there's investors that specialize in each of these areas, and kind of what you need to have there. I'll actually come back to the beginning here. Series A funding, add fuel to the fire. Series A, you have something that's working, so you want to start to scale it. 7 to 8 figure raise. Series C, Series B, turn the fire into a bonfire. Series C, let the bonfire loose on the forest. So I think the main thing that I would say is the longer you can wait to raise money, the better, generally. The more traction you can get, the better. Keep your burn really low and just iterate a ton. Don't make assumptions yourself. Solve pain that someone else is having that they'll know. They won't know the answer like we talked about. A second. And just keep trying to create that MVP. Spend as long as you can doing that. Not as long as you can. Get as far as you can being successful with that. So fundraising is a lot like dating. The more you need the money, the less people want to give it to you. The less you need the money, the more people want to give it to you. And so the more that you can do and prove, the more people are going to want to fund your company. And the more that you spend time asking for money, the less successful you'll probably be, and the less time you'll have to actually create something that people want. So it's all about taking as many shots on goal, as much experimentation as you can, as much failure to find those successes, and just keep iterating on those. So probably the right time to raise money for you, assuming that you don't have a track record where you're like, yeah, I sold my last company for $1 billion, and then you can just go out and fundraise. But if you don't have that, probably the right time to raise money is when you have anywhere between a couple dozen to a couple hundred people that can't live without what you're making. It's way more valuable to have a few people that are really passionate about what you have than have a lot of people that are kind of like, meh, I don't really care. It's kind of good, but it's not really that good. If you have a couple dozen to a couple hundred people that are like, oh my God, this is life-changing, I can't live without this, it's probably a good time to go out and raise a seed round. Okay, you had a question?
Yeah, so you just talked about the importance of keeping the cutting down the cost and try to get profit. But is Uber kind of counter-example to that? They are still burning money.
Is Uber a counterexample? Yeah, Uber is a counterexample in a lot of ways. Here's the thing about Uber. Here's actually why Uber is so interesting. The power of product market fit. Product market fit is so powerful that Uber was able to change laws because of product market fit, right? When Uber first started operating in cities, it was often illegal to do so. And it was actually the laws that changed and not the product that changed. The product market fit was so strong and the pain that we all had in taxis was so great that Uber was able to get the law to be changed. And when you have really strong product market fit, and you have people that are so passionate about what you're building, you have a lot of power. And you can raise a lot of money because you don't need the money. I mean, they need the money, but there's a lot of people that want to give them the money. They need the money now because they're scaling like crazy, right? And the unit economics might still not be profitable, although I don't know that they're not. I think it's city dependent. But the product market is so strong that they can write their own rules. So I think really what I take from that example is if you can solve a really deep need in a way that was maybe not obvious to other people but is actually there, then you have a lot of control and power over how you fundraise. Yeah. Okay, what else? Other thoughts, questions, things you'd like to talk about? We have 20 minutes left. I'm happy to let you go early also. So if you all want to end early, we totally can. Get out of class 20 minutes early, that sounds pretty good. Okay, what you got? Weird. I like it.
Yeah. So I guess, like, when you're building a company or like a software, I guess an MVP, what kind of traction do you usually kind of need before you take it to an investor?
Okay, what kind of traction do you need before you take an MVP to an investor? I mean, I think it's a couple dozen to a couple hundred people that can't live without what you're making. I think that's really that's my kind of like initial cutoff, where I would be comfortable going to a seed investor or an angel investor and saying, hey, this thing, there's something real here. There's external signals that are meaningful that this is working. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if you mean more funding than that, like later stages.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'll just change after you get your initial round, but yeah, like I guess at what point like do you already need sales? Like you just like getting people using already using.
Okay. Do you already need sales? So it kind of depends on whether it's B2B or B2C. So I mean, if you want to make $1,000, you can either sell something for $1 to 1,000 people, or something for $1,000 to one person, right? So B2B tends to be the latter, oftentimes. B2C tends to be the former, oftentimes. And for B2C, it's all about scaling the user base, having a lot of metrics that show strong growth, and that strong growth will translate into dollars at some point in the future. Hey, there's 1,000 people using this. I'm not charging them $1 today each, but I could. And if I did, I think this percentage would convert. With B2B, it's a little bit, oftentimes, these rules can be broken, but it's oftentimes a little bit different. With B2B, it's all about more of a top-down sale. You know, it's a deeper, more comprehensive answer, oftentimes, because you're solving for a bigger problem, oftentimes. But revenue is always king. So if you're generating revenue, that's always, well, all right, hold on. This gets a little bit tricky. It's not always a good thing. You don't want to sacrifice growth for monetization, right? Yeah. You probably want to get as much growth as you can. Revenue is the ultimate arbiter that says, hey, this is working. Like a company can't be a nonprofit forever, right? At some point, you have to make money. Amazon's been able to wait 20 years. You know, I mean, they're just really thinking long term. Revenue shows that you have something that people are willing to open their pocketbooks for. So the ultimate validation is the kind that you can deposit. Having said that, monetizing early is not always the right thing, right? What you really want is you really want to be able to show value. You want people to, if they don't have, if what you're building goes away, their lives are like, the quality of their lives is markedly decreased in some way. And so it kind of depends, right? It kind of depends. But you definitely don't need revenue to raise, especially in the early stages. I would not be too worried about monetizing. I'd be worried about creating value, something that people can't live without. If you do that, you'll be able to monetize.
So follow up. I'm working on something right now.
Oh, okay. All right, what you got?
So I have this, right now it's just like a YouTube channel.
Okay.
But I have like, on average, like 2,500 unique viewers per day.
Okay, that's pretty
good. And
I
started monetizing it like pretty early.
You just turned on YouTube ads? Or?
Yeah, I do. Well, that's like, yeah, I do ads and then also like affiliate marketing.
Okay.
That's like my biggest way of monetizing it. But like, yeah, I'm just wondering, I've talked to people and like, they're like, oh, don't monetize it yet. Try to grow the users up as much as possible. But at the same time, like, I don't know, I like monetizing it, obviously. I like money, but I don't know, like, I'm just kind of, what do you think?
Okay.
How do you draw the line between monetizing too early and then rather than like pushing growth?
Okay, so all right, so we have an undercover entrepreneur in the room here. How many other entrepreneurs do we have, people who are doing something today? All right, we got a few. Why did no one say anything earlier? I put up the results from the survey that you all filled out. Nobody said they were doing a company today, and yet, you know, it's some incognito people in here. That's awesome. That's really cool. I'd love to hear your stories as well, by the way. So, my short answer is it depends on your goals. Depends on what you want to get out of this kind of early stage business. If your goal is to generate cash, then you should monetize. If your goal is to try to figure out how much impact you can have, you probably shouldn't monetize. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't run some experiments to see what monetizing means, right? It's good to understand with this many views, this is what monetization looks like.
Yeah.
So it's good to understand that, but it really just depends on your goals. If you want to try to make it relevant as possible, then the answer may not be monetization. But the other way that I would answer that is, when you monetize, do you experience drop-offs? Does growth slow?
Yeah.
So run those experiments. Like, again, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters how the market reacts. So run those experiments to see what is the impact of monetization. And maybe that there is no impact because people are so used to seeing ads that they don't even think about it. Right? So let the data tell you. That's really cool. All right, determine what you got.
I was also curious, so a lot of companies try to avoid raising like a seed round, and they try to like get like a Series A. So like I want to get your like thoughts about maybe trying to not do a seed round funding, and then trying to go for a Series A directly, or like is it necessary to get like that seed round and getting like that money early on?
Okay, so is it necessary to do a seed round, or should you just wait for an A? So I think the first thing is that round definitions are all F. Like what you know, like we did a $10 million Series A. A couple of years ago, that would have been a Series B, but now it's a Series A. So the fund sizes of a lot of these VCs are growing so large that they have to put a lot of capital to work to really be able to deploy it in a way that moves the needle. And so generally, round sizes are increasing, which makes it a little bit of the have and have-nots, because with higher round sizes comes higher need to be able to prove that you have something that's worth putting more money to work in. So I think the first thing is that seed and A and B, they're not quite as well defined as they used to be, and they're all kind of merging together and shifting. So I don't even think about it as whether you should do a seed or an A, so much as how much money can you put to work that will allow you to have a meaningful scale change in the business. So like at Armory, if we were to raise $100 million tomorrow, it's very unclear that we can put that money to work in really smart ways. Right? Like there's some amount of money that we know that we can put to work. We have figured enough out that we understand if we could do X, Y, and Z, we would be able to grow faster. But money doesn't solve for figuring, like product development, figuring things out and finding answers. Like more money is not better. So the question I'll put back to you is, how much money could you raise that would allow you to get to a meaningful step function change in the scale of your business? And that's probably the right amount that you should raise. And another way to think about that is you probably want 12 to 18, maybe 24 months of runway so that you have enough time to iterate and figure things out. If you raise less than that, then you're just going to have to be raising again in 6 months. So, you know, there's a good saying that doing a startup is like a tour, like a road trip, and you have to stop at gas stations. Those are the VCs. You don't want to be doing a tour of gas stations, right? You want to fill up so that you can then go as far as you can. And so, you know, raise enough to get to that meaningful next level. Give yourself, let's call it 18 months of runway, because you have to plan it's going to take you 6 months to raise. Hopefully it won't, but just in case. So you really have a year to be just focused and executing. And you can do that based on calculating your burn, how many people do you have, what do they cost, what else are you going to have to invest in. So I wouldn't think about it as round stage as much as I would putting cash to work in really effective ways. Yeah. All right, other questions?
We wanted to build a product that has a that focus on the product review as well as connecting people that are interested in, say, this brand or like that brand, and then the merchants as well. But my problem has been it's been hard for me to find founders that kind of agree or share the same view. And when we somehow agree on something, it's very hard for our minds to kind of get to the same understanding that we are going to attack this problem this way. So how do you kind of convince the founders or like convince the people around you to work on this problem with you and then go on to the
How do you convince founders to join you, and how do you find people to share your vision and your passion with enough overlap that things don't go poorly? So I think the first thing that I would say is things often do go poorly. So I've had a couple startups, and I've had founder issues in several of my past startups. It's just how it often goes that people don't share the same vision. The interests aren't exactly aligned. I mean, I've been very, very lucky to have a co-founder, like I said, for 11 years. And it's really nice to have a startup where we don't have founder issues, but it took a lot of experience to get there. And you probably will have founder issues. There's no like Tinder for startups. There's no really easy way to find founders. So let's talk about a couple of things, and let me dissect that in a few ways. The first thing that I would say is you don't necessarily need a co-founder. You probably should have a co-founder, largely because startups are very lonely things. Like by definition, when you start a company, you are doing something that's impossible. If it wasn't impossible, it would have already been done. So by definition, when you have an idea, other people are going to think it's stupid and dumb. Because if they didn't, they'd be trying it as well. Right? So by definition, startups are very lonely things because you've got this idea that you want to bring into the world that nobody shares. And so it is hard to find somebody that is close enough to that's very aligned. I do think it's good to have a hacker and a hustler. That's how I like to say it, right? Somebody who can really build value and somebody that can take that value and bring it out into the world. And so I don't know if you would consider yourself a hacker or a hustler, but it's probably good to have a complementary person. So I think 2 people is a great number. 3 is also pretty okay. 4 is, I think, really too many. Largely because when you have 4 founders, you dilute your equity a lot. And so, there's nothing worse than creating $1 billion company and then only ending up with a sliver of it because you have a lot of dilution along the way. So you have to protect your equity very carefully. So I think the thing that I would say is going to events, whether it's like meetups for Go or whatever the technology is that you want to build in, finding people that are very like-minded. You mentioned it's a concept around a fashion app, for example. So just going to events where there are people that have similar interests is probably a good place to start. I think it's also good to experiment. Try hacking on projects with people, see how it goes. I think it can be a really good way to see how aligned you are. And I think the other thing is, like when you have a co-founder, what you end up with is a mixture of what you both think. So if you're really dogmatic about it's your idea and it has to be done this way, it's going to be a lot harder to find somebody versus you're like, I really care about some technology, or I really care about some theme, and I want to solve a problem in that general area. You can come together, find a co-founder that also is very passionate about that same technology or that same area. So the more sure you are that your startup is exactly the way that you want it, the harder it's going to be to find somebody. So those are a few thoughts. Also, you said something that's pretty interesting. So let's do a little quick exercise since we have a couple minutes. Who wants to come up here and sell me this pen? Come on, curious or determined. Who wants to go up here and sell me this pen? Someone's got to want to do it. Come on, it's a pen. Pen has value. I'm just going to awkwardly stand up here and wait till someone raises their hand. Anyone? You're doing a startup? You want to try it?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Come on down. Come on down.
Can I stay over here?
Well, it depends on how effective you want to do in front of the pen.
Can I see the pen? Like just toss it to me. Real quick.
I mean, I can't even hear you, so I probably can't buy.
No, just toss me the pen.
Hey, what's that?
Just,
I mean, I buy something when I can't even hear what you're saying.
all right, let me see.
I mean, I think in order for you to sell me this pen effectively,
I'll come.
you probably need to be.
Is this like an exercise? You're gonna help me do this, or?
I mean, I've got money, so the question is, do I need a pen? All right, come on up, man. All right.
Okay.
So, what you got?
Well, do you need a pen? My first question.
I don't know. What does a pen do?
You can write stuff with it.
Okay.
You can draw stuff with it.
Mostly use a computer these days.
That's interesting. Well, and if you don't need a pen, I really can't sell it to you. But if you did need a pen, I have a pen for you to buy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good looking pen. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I could use it as a paperweight or something.
Paperweight. Well, you need a paperweight.
Well, I don't really use paper anymore, actually. So, probably not a paperweight.
Well, what do you use right now?
Let's see, I use a computer all day long.
Okay.
I also have very curious children.
Okay. Do they like playing with pens?
They love playing with pens.
Well,
You mentioned
I have a really cheap pen.
I do.
That you can maybe gift to them. I think they love it. You make them really happy.
Then I'd be an amazing dad.
And
I could, like,
exactly.
Bring home.
Well, like you're never home, right? But if you walk in this beautiful pen,
Oh my God,
they love you so much
They
more.
will love me so. Okay, all right. Hold on 1 second, because it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned this because I already have a pen.
Oh.
I already have a pen. So I don't. How is your pen different than my pen?
It's identical.
Two kids. It's true. I do have 2 kids at home.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
I like you guys.
Yeah, I do have 2 kids at home. Maybe.
Well, in the movie, I know in the movie the guy was like, write down your name, and then he didn't have a pen, so then he's like, all right, well, supply and demand.
Yeah, he has
So how much is a pen?
Well, depends how much you want to pay for it.
Okay.
Because I got it for free, so.
So you should be willing to give it to me.
Well, I need it for my own personal.
Oh, you do?
purposes,
Oh,
yeah.
I see. That's too bad.
So you'll only have one pen, right? So like one of your kids are gonna be really, really mad.
That's a really good point.
But honestly, if you have another pen, I'm sure you're gonna have a black one. And if you have 2 different pens with 2 different kids, like that's causing a lot of problems.
It's also really true.
And then what might happen is your wife might get mad at you.
Oh.
And then they won't be able to sleep at night. So then like, you should buy
I
this
probably
pen.
shouldn't come home with just 1 pen.
No, I think
That's a
you
really
should.
good point.
Yeah.
You'd have a lot of unhappiness.
Exactly.
Okay, well, you haven't told me how much it costs.
$100.
Well, everyone else is selling this exact pen for like $100.
Oh, they are. I haven't.
But it's just it's kind of your lucky day today, and I'm going to give it to you for half off. Like $50 for this one pen.
50, I thought these were like 50 cents.
Inflation.
Well, I actually don't have any cash on me.
Well, do you have Venmo?
Venmo, yeah, I've got Venmo.
Layaway, whatever we can do with this thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, would you take $1 for it?
If you have $1, I'll take $1.
Venmo you $1.
We can do that too.
You can also Venmo.
I'll take anything for this.
I think you need to talk to this guy.
Honestly,
This guy's a Jiminy Cricket, like a you know?
good cow, bad cow.
He's just, yeah, exactly. You should sell it. Okay, all right. I'll Venmo you $1 later.
Appreciate it. Thanks for doing that.
So that was fun. So the reason that I wanted to do that was because it's awesome just to see how people try to create value, right? It's really interesting. But there's another thing that you did that I just want to point out, which is that you tried to sell me the physical object, right? It's like, this isn't a pen. This is an exam as a service, right? Like this pen, you're not getting a physical object, you're getting me taking your next test for you. And I happen to be certified in whatever your next test is. So, or you could sell me a warranty on this pen. You can sell me things that are beyond just the physical object in front of you. And that's something that I was hoping might come to light. I mean, it was a fun experience. But think beyond the thing that you see. Think about, and you did a really good job of that, by the way, talking about when you go home, your kid's going to be mad at you, right? Yeah, you're pulling on like the heartstrings there. You know, I don't want my kids to be mad at me. But really go beyond the physical object and think about the problem that you can help somebody solve. So thanks for having the courage to get up and do that. Okay, I think we're out of time. So let's talk about how we can continue this conversation. First thing is, do we have a lot of notes in there? Did anybody take notes? Raise your hand if you took some notes. Okay. So there's resources in there from today. I think this looks like this is being recorded too. So if you can't sleep some night and you're like, what did that guy DROdio say? You got it. If you send me this video, I'll post it into that document. Right? So that's one thing, is I really care a lot and I'm very passionate about entrepreneurs. I believe that being an entrepreneur is a little bit of a crazy thing, and you're smart not to do it. But if you choose that you want to do it, if you have an idea you can't get out of your head, I'd love to help you. I'd love to do whatever I can to help ensure your success. And so feel free to keep in touch with me. Let me actually give you the best way to do that. So if you want to get in touch with me, DROdio@gmail.com. I get a lot of email, so in the subject line, put Berkeley or something that I'll recognize. Don't put like, I want to sell you Viagra or whatever. So that's another thing. Another thing is, if you decide that you want to try to solve the problem that I mentioned, I'd love to talk about that, because that is a very real problem I'm having right now. And I'm sure that I'll think of others. Yes?
How common do you think is that problem? Is it very common in the YC community?
How common is that problem? So that's a really good question, right? Is this just a one-off thing that DROdio's crazy thinks, or is it a problem that I can scale across multiple customers? The answer is, I don't know. But I would encourage you to find out. If it's something that you're interested in building, go ask a bunch of YC founders. Go just call a bunch of CEOs and find out if it's something that they would like. I think the best way to do that is to say, I've got this data from one CEO that said that he wanted this, and I'm ready to start building it, but I want to make sure that I build the right thing. I don't want to sell you. I'm not calling you to sell you. I'm calling you to interview and understand what your pain is, and if you have this pain. Because if you do, I'd like to solve it. Do 30 or 60-minute calls, do 100 of those, and see what you get. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I'm having it. So that's another thing. Those are probably the two things. Don't drop out of school unless you have such a hot startup that you can't help it. So thanks for having me. It's fun. I actually do need my pens back. So if you'd be willing to not sell it back to me, I would definitely appreciate that. But just pass them up front.